Welcome back to another episode of Keeping Up with Data. Today we are blessed with the presence of
Shabbir from DBT.
Shabbir from DBT and Big P Polaine from Precision. This one's very much DBT focused. Shabbir, I'll let him do an introduction to himself, but is currently a senior solutions architect slash pre-sales architect at DBT Labs. DBT is obviously making a lot of noise in the market at the moment and changing the way data teams are operating. And there's a lot of news to come in this podcast about DBT and where they plan to go in the future. But we'll start with Shabbir and maybe an introduction into Shabbir, his background, how he got into tech and the journey to where you are now.
Great. Thank you, Sean. So, hey, everybody, I'm Shabbir. My journey's been an interesting one. I actually qualified originally as an actuary, which I thought that was the direction I'd use my knowledge of maths and things like that to solve some kind of problem. But, the market's been evolving so quickly in the last decade. So even during my time in uni, data was just becoming like so public in terms of like how important it's going to be for businesses in the future, how valuable it can be as a career. So I just basically pivoted straight as a grad into data analytics, right? That's where I learned SQL. That's where I learned how to talk to customers, connect data to like real business problems. I think where things really evolved for me though was the diagonal move from just being a data practitioner like many of you are into this world of pre-sales, right? So I got this fascinating opportunity to move to Databricks to become a solutions architect. I might quickly define pre-sales for people watching because I think it's an interesting career journey that many may want to replicate.
Please do. Yeah.
For me, I see pre-sales as like the perfect middle ground of being in the room to provide vision to customers, but also getting to still play with the details, be a nerd, work with engineers, and do the fun part, not just be out of the details all the time. So it's right in between. And by being like a data consultant, at Quantium where I was previously, I think we just got a chance to always link the data projects to outcomes. And that's what exactly pre-sales people have to do, right? It's just in the context of selling a product as well, not just selling a solution. I happen to love Spark. That's how I ended up at Databricks.
Yeah.
And then coming to DBT now was super interesting, right? Because that journey of seeing all these startups and scale-ups in Australia, and we have a really bustling like startups community here. Everybody had angel funding or VC funding, and they need to hit the ground running, right? So how did they do it? Well, Databricks was an awesome platform, but they needed ways to simplify. They kept turning to Fivetran and dbt again and again and again. So I became really well-versed in all that. I became a big fan, and here I am now.
Yeah. Well, let's break DBT down into layman's terms for people who maybe have heard about it, but not in the know. How would you describe it for the most simplistic way?
The most simplistic way to explain DBT is it is a tool to build process around data transformations. Okay? So data transformations is such a general term. The purpose of it really is to get your data from unclean business systems like sources into a usable form that your analysts and your data scientists can build actual value driving use cases out of. So that journey is ETL. And now getting through that ETL can be complicated. You might involve Python or R or Scala. And so DBT philosophically is always about how do we get people who already know SQL to do this with the same standards, like that production engineering standard that everyone else was doing, but in a way they can understand. Yeah. So it's trying to bring the bar down really for that.
So it's almost like making ETLs sexier in a way, in a sense.
I think so. Because like now you look in the market and like there's so many people who actually can transition into ETL and own their own work. They don't have to wait for weeks for some Jira ticket to be solved by another engineer who knows more than them.
Yeah.
I had that experience all the time back in Quantium where we were just SQL analysts. Yeah. And we had real engineers who'd build production stuff for us. But every time I had an idea, I just write the SQL and I had to tell my engineer, hey, can you make this production ready? And he knew Scala, but he didn't know SQL. So now we'd spend all this time like trying to translate concepts. He'd write something. He's like, hey, do you think this is right? No, it's right. I don't know.
Yeah. So everyone's talking about the SQL is dead, ETLs is dead, ELTs have come to market. What was the original use case for DBT? Obviously, it's relatively new.
Yeah.
What was the main? Is it purely data transformations? Was that the main problem you were looking to tackle?
Well, think about how data transformations were done before, right? So before cloud, right? The data transformations were done by tools like SSIS or something where you basically process all the data into that analytics ready form in another tool with its own compute, and then you land it in your data server, like your SQL server, your Postgres database, Teradata, something like that. That's the old way of doing things. Now, when we move to the cloud, right, you people didn't want to bolt on those tools because they had infinite compute at their fingertips. How do we use that infinite compute for the ETL part too? That's what ELT is, right? I said load the data in as is and then transform it using the cloud compute. But to do that, it was really scrappy because people would just write SQL or Python or something, right? Especially in Redshift, they don't have an option, right? You only had SQL. So dbt was created around that time to solve that problem of using cloud compute and SQL to model data in a structured way and get an output. So actually, dbt was actually originally a consultancy called Fishdown Analytics. And these guys, actually, the founders, Tristan and Drew, they just built this tool to help them with their consulting engagements. But it became way more popular. So they
Was man, it took off.
Pretty good, right? 9 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. What would be some of the misconceptions around dbt on the market? Like when you go out pre-sales, obviously you're speaking to clients, you're talking about problem solutions, how this is going to slot in to fix and save your whole database, etc.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you've heard where people have come to you and been like, oh, I thought this is what was supposed to do with dbt, but is there anything like that? Or
yeah, it's an interesting one. Like, again, because dbt, okay, I think there's two misconceptions. One is more fundamentally, right? We have an open source component, which is where the communities come from. There's about 1 million people using dbt every day. But then, and so understanding that, hey, like we've got some dbt project, maybe we expect dbt to fix that for us when it doesn't work as a company. I think maybe that's one misconception.
Yeah.
Like obviously we have an enterprise solution which we sell and which we try to extend the concept to be enterprise ready. And so obviously maybe there's a misunderstanding that we're not just like free support for everybody's personal projects. But even more fundamentally than that, it's just like the idea of, does dbt take your data out of your platform to do its job? Because that's what all these tools used to do, right? Even Informatica today, right? It's a tool everybody still uses. It takes your data out and it computes it in its own way, then lands in back in. So dbt is the only tool in the market that's like, or major tool, I should say, that's not really like that. We are sending code, like templating SQL and sending that into the data platforms. So it's just running SQL queries as you always would, just in a structured way that you can understand.
You learn something new every day.
Yeah, I didn't know. That's quite interesting. I suppose on the flip side, and you've kind of answered it on Sean's question there, but where would it not be relevant, right? Where would you maybe not use dbt in real world use cases?
Good question. I think the big one is like, what was dbt really designed around philosophically? And it was like batch ETL. Okay. Most like the first problem that dbt sought to solve for was like, I have a dashboard, I have some data, I need to model it in a consistent way so that my dashboard works. That's a batch use case. You can run that once a week, once a day maybe, and dbt will work because it just creates tables, it creates views, and that joins it does SQL logic.
Yeah.
In Databricks, we often talk about real-time use cases, which is becoming very important now. Telemetry data, any kind of production data from your app or something that needs to be streamed, or fraud detection.
Yeah.
This kind of stuff needs like millisecond latency. And I kind of distinguish it as like, how much does your data need to be transformed for your use case? And versus how fast can you expect it to be sent, right? And then maybe the last pillar there is how expensive or what's your budget for this use case, right? So think about it like this, like if you just have some data that's coming in, like telemetry data, right? It means like what happened in my app, who clicked what, who logged into what. You just want to process that and just take the data as is and then say, was there any fraud in this? That's a very transformation light use case. You don't need to do much SQL there. You don't need to do group bys or aggregates or joins. So you can send that data in milliseconds and then do that machine learning score and then do something with that. Don't use dbt for this. This is a low latency streaming use case. So there are great tools in the market like Confluent does this. Even in Databricks, Delta Live Tables did really well at this. But when you need actual transformations, like let's say you pitch to me, hey, I have a customer 360 dashboard, right? Which has hundreds of metrics about my customers and all these aggregate metrics, but I need it updated every millisecond. I'll tell you that's almost impossible. You can try to stream that. And the only way to make this work is to throw tons and tons and tons of compute. Once you see the budget, you're not going to want to do it. And the amount of times my POC started back in Databricks as like, we want this to be real time. And then they see the cost and I'm like, no, daily's fine. Yeah. So that's the distinction, is streaming versus batch. But batches are still most use cases.
So you
most
would,
data use cases,
in a sense, be steering people away from dbt if...
Yeah, I have to be honest. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's I'll tell people that, like, because I don't want to sell people a lemon if it's not the right fit, right?
Yeah.
And so like big companies have gone all in on dbt, Like Canva has gone all in on dbt is a great local example. But even the way they've done it, they can admit as well, is like it doesn't actually solve every use case, even if they're trying to make it solve every use case. So sometimes you have to go back to the drawing board, be honest about what dbt is built for, what its strength is. It's not an everything tool yet.
I think the cost thing obviously is at the forefront of everyone's mind with everything they do daily. Like I know AWS, for example, and some of the bigger cloud partners get a lot of stick or slack in the market for, we'll give you these 150,000 free credits, but they're gone. You get them and the next day they're gone. And then this never ending revolving debt wheel. Like, does dbt work with every cloud's old school SSIS stack? There's nothing where it doesn't fit into?
I'd say it's very much a modern tool. Okay. So like it doesn't work with every tool. Like because there's an open source side to it, people have hacked together, dare I say, or just like done as little fun projects like dbt adapters for their own, any like random database. So you can have dbt on DuckDB. You can have dbt on Teradata and Postgres. Or you can have, of course, the big ones, right? dbt on Databricks, Snowflake, etc. But if someone is using like an SSIS or an Informatica alongside, I would say that's another way of doing it. We have our own highly opinionated philosophy. To do it that way.
One of our clients, I won't name the name just for whatever's sake.
Sure.
But they were talking about, they use this as a sell point to get people into their, I suppose, squad in terms of their transformations. So, we're not going to buy dbt, but we're building and modeling our own dbt internally. And from speaking with people, it was like, no, it was not what dbt is in any way, shape or form. Do you see people trying to mimic what dbt are doing lower context, or is it people that are trying to copy it? And
it's the most copied tool in the market, mate. Like, because we have a free per version, right? Like step one of that copy is taking the open source and forking it into your own thing, or building like an enterprise tool of your own around it, right? Like 2-3 years ago, even dbt's enterprise tool wasn't good enough. It was just an IDE in the web for dbt, the free thing, and then we charge for it. That's like not that exciting, right? Only if you really don't know how to use Git and VS Code and CLIs would you buy that. But we had to add a lot of value to the tool before it became something we can sell. And this year has been a really great year for that. But the other side of that is just taking the principles and editing. I'll just give you a quick example. Like in Databricks, right? Their opinionated framework. So, okay, let me step back again. So let's just look at Databricks and Snowflake as examples of this, right? Snowflake, if you go into the UI right now, it's mainly a SQL editor. Right now, they've added other things, but primarily you go in to make analytics code. So when it came to engineering code, they didn't have any interface that was specifically good for that. So dbt and Snowflake was like the architecture of choice. Go to dbt, you do that part there, and run it on Snowflake Compute, and we're all happy with that arrangement. Databricks was like, we can build everything ourselves. Let's be real, right? That's their philosophy across the platform. It's cooperate when they need to, but build in-house when they can. And Delta Live Tables is a prime example of that 3 years ago, I think, right? They designed their own framework to solve it, an opinionated ETL, same as dbt, and had positives. They brought in the idea of streaming natively in SQL. That was really cool. But it had a lot of negatives. For example, dbt comes to the fore with data tests, with CI/CD, with observability in production, right? Moving between environments. Like, these are things that dbt does, and DLT wasn't doing any of those things. So every time someone asked us, as a solution architect at Databricks back in the day, how do I get this code from dev to prod? Don't know. I think you have to do this. I think, there's like this YAML and JSON. Like, maybe we can save this somewhere. It was really awkward, right? Because these are the actual considerations. Fast forward 3 years, and if you log into DLT now, it's called Spark Declarative Pipelines. They've rebranded for a reason, by the way. Shake off the diff. You go to that UI, and it looks exactly like dbt's UI. Code editor, lineage, one piece of code per model, and then YAML to manage all the configs. Where did they get that bright idea from?
Got all the vibe covers out there trying to take every product post. I can do this for cheaper.
And then it's a race to the bottom, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's been our awkward point, right? All of our competition, or even SQL Mesh, right? Very good open source alternative to dbt. So what do you do when the market is building all these viable competitors and taking the same principles and basically reducing your competitive advantage, right? You need to create a new competitive advantage.
Yeah. Seems there's a lot of collabs going on then with different, not competing entities in a sense, but yeah, at the same time, competing entities.
Yeah.
I think that leads us on to maybe a bit of a drum roll for some news that's going on in the DBT world. What's the latest coming out with DBT? I heard you've got some big news there.
We do have some big news. So you may have seen publicly, and actually this is funny because it was a surprise for us internally too. It was first reported by this tech columnist, I guess, or a column called The Information, that Fivetran is in talks to buy DBT. And we were like, huh?
What's this
Since when?
How's that going to work?
Yeah. You start asking internally and everyone's like, we'll see. Like, no, not saying yes.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it was announced at Coalesce at Las Vegas that Fivetran has merged, not acquired, merged with DBT Labs, right? So the reactions of this have been like very interesting, and I'd use the word mixed. Some practitioners who are all in on the free version of DBT will be like, oh no, my free tool is being bought by the big corporate Fivetran.
I got to start forking
Right?
out for it now.
Scary, right?
Yeah.
We better fork DBT and just like have our own thing now. And then other people, especially enterprises, maybe already bought both. Maybe they're just like, oh, we'll get a cheaper contract, get a bulk deal now, right? Yeah. But this has been much cooler than just a merger between two obvious partners, right? Because if you just took it at face value, Fivetran is the EL and DBT is the T, you got an ELT tool now, right? Yeah. It does everything. That sounds fine, right? Sufficient. You could bolt them on.
Yeah.
But I see more ambition behind Fivetran and DBT merger. We've heard a lot internally, we've seen that through blogs, but we're kind of reimagining what a data platform can do through this concept called the open data infrastructure. So, new idea. And I think it's a good play by the companies to reshape the market, which is quickly coalescing around the big players, right? If we didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So to zoom out again, like think about what platforms like Databricks and Snowflake are doing because they're building out. So, okay, what do they commercialize on, right? Compute and storage, right? Databricks less so on storage because they just land everything as S3, but compute is the main revenue generator for them.
Yeah.
If you're doing use cases in production, if you're doing AI, they're making money. How you do it is irrelevant. If it's using Databricks and Snowflake compute, they're fine. So they're commoditizing the capabilities in the platform. How you ingest data? Well, they've got a cheaper alternative to Fivetran. How do you model your data? They've got notebooks, they've got the Spark declarative pipelines. You don't need to buy a tool. It's already here.
Yeah.
They've got an orchestrator, they've got a BI, they've got AI. It's all there already. So why do you have to buy another tool? Why do all these little tools like DBT and stuff matter? Fair play, right? So if we did nothing, I think there'll be an obsolescence eventually where everyone's just like, I mean, let's be real. Like we all with the iPhones right now. You just use the native mail app and native count because it's there. It's already installed. Why do I need to get another one and pay $2 for that, right? So we're kind of making a bet with open data infrastructure to flip the entire market on its head. Instead of commoditizing letting the platforms commoditize the capabilities, we want to commoditize the compute that they generate revenue on. So we want to be first class capability, best ingestion tool in the market, best transformation tool in the market. We have Census, Fivetran bought Census, which is a reverse ETL tool. Reverse ETL means you send data back out to platforms for like actioning. Imagine so that now we have that in-house too. We will have a orchestrator and lineage end to end, which is already partially in each tool and can be combined. What that all means is we can have the single view that data can come straight from your apps, and Fivetran is like 700 plus connectors now, so essentially any app, modeled out with DBT in a consistent market-leading way and sent out to your tools to action into use cases. And all of that will look the same no matter what platform it's on. Okay? So the DBT part, the Fivetran part, that's platform agnostic.
Yeah.
Okay? And so we want to get to a place where our product can allow enterprises to centralize on this concept and then freely migrate that entire stack on a cost basis, wherever it's cheaper. Because it doesn't matter anymore because you're still running Fivetran, DBT, and Census, etc.
There's a lot to unpack on that, isn't there?
So, yeah. I mean, for like, I guess, our customers or customers generally that are listening to this, what sort of progress can they really expect? Because what you've described is amazing and there's so many moving parts, but, there's got to be a timeline to this. Like, where are you guys now in terms of that merger?
Yeah. I think a lot of people, when they saw this announcement, they said, it's cool vision, I guess, but yes, that's all bullshit. Like DBT is just some SQL templating, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's two big leaps we've made technology-wise that already are out there to already make this possible. One is how do you store the data in a way that's universal for all those platforms? So when you move it, you don't need to migrate. And how do you make the code totally agnostic? So that when you change the code from Databricks to Snowflake, for example, even the code doesn't need to change or is easy to change and doesn't require lots of effort. That's how we make this migration proof and actually commoditize compute. Let's talk about each one. So the first one is the storage layer. Databricks pioneered the idea for Lakehouse a few years ago. Instead of storing data as tables in your own platform in a locked down way, they said, how can we bring all those data warehouse capabilities to a data lake, which means files that you own in your own S3 bucket or Azure Data Lake storage or something, with all the governance and all the performance that data warehouses have had for years. Once you have that in an agnostic layer and that protocol, they invented one called Delta Lake, but there's a more popular one called Iceberg now, right? Which they've also bought, by the way. These are protocols that the whole market can read and write to, more or less. There's still limitations, but if everyone can read and write there, it means you can create this lakehouse with Databricks and then move it to Snowflake and it'll work as is. All your data you've modeled, that work you did for years, still works when you change platforms now. Because Snowflake can just point to it and inherit that.
Yeah.
So that's the storage layer. And dbt's totally got Iceberg like native capabilities now. And the idea that you can make multiple dbt projects where one project is in Snowflake and the other's in Databricks is possible now for them to join up and share metadata because it's all one Iceberg layer behind. So you can have like the finance team doing something in Snowflake and then seamlessly handing off that work to a marketing team to take that and do something else. And they'll see one lineage graph thanks to dbt. That's what we're adding to the picture. Right?
Yeah.
It is big because like years ago, and I'd done this, and just to focus on the Iceberg thing for a second, right? Back in Databricks, we had customers using Databricks and Snowflake together. Snowflake for warehousing, Databricks for data science. But how did the data go between them? They'd have to copy the data manually, or they'd have to use ugly, like they call JDBC connectors, right? Which would be very unperformant, because it means it has to like push the data between platforms and push it back again all the time. And you have to leave compute on both sides. It's actually really expensive too. Expensive and slow, worst of both worlds.
Yeah.
So now we're at a place where when I did this demo, I actually did it in Coalesce, Sydney and Melbourne like a couple of weeks ago. We basically were able to demonstrate to the audience that like, this is essentially real time. It's just normal. Like it's as if you never had two platforms. It's totally wild when you realize that I'm just reading a Snowflake table, joining it to a Databricks table and creating another Databricks table as if it's nothing.
Simple.
Right? It becomes that simple.
Complex but simple.
The setup takes like 30 minutes or an hour, but once you're there, you're there. Your company's post-migration, essentially, right?
So we're going to see some events then with maybe dbt, like Databricks obviously have their own events, Snowflake. Do you think that's down the line? Fivetran X dbt events?
Fivetran X dbt for sure, right? Like whatever this new entity is called, we'll be inheriting that whole Coalesce like event. And we're going to be like really kind of showcasing this stuff more and more, right?
So we're looking at a total rebrand name-wise.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Wow.
Newco for now. We'll find the new name.
Yeah, newcompany.com.
Yeah.
Undecided.org.
But the other really big pillar here, which is worth touching on, is how do we make the code totally agnostic too, right? Because that's the only little proprietary thing left in SQL. It's Snowflake SQL doesn't quite look the same as Databricks SQL, which doesn't look quite the same as Teradata SQL. It's these little things that they try to lock you in on, right? And so even with dbt, right, what did it do to the code? It took out all the ugly proprietary parts and made it just a select statement, okay? And the only thing left now, when you have like a dbt select statement to move it from Snowflake to Databricks, was to change the function names, which are very rare, like lack of overlap. I'll just give a quick example. Maybe Snowflake has this date add function where you can, change the date by a couple of days or a month or something. They would call it date add, whereas Databricks called date _ add. So that would just throw an error until you changed it, right? Yeah. If you just tried to use the code as is in Databricks. And the other one was data types. So Snowflake might have something called like a varchar. That's like your way of describing a word, right? As a column. And Databricks called a string. So if you wrote in your code something that referenced this being a varchar, Databricks say, don't know what that is, right? These are simple examples, and they've all been working on compatibility anyway. But to bridge that gap, we can actually automate all the conversions of non-compatible features through a very, very interesting new age technology, which we call dbt fusion, right? Now, dbt fusion is what I was referring to before when I said we need a new competitive advantage.
Yeah.
Because it's not good enough to have something that can template SQL and help bring production practices and data tests, because everyone is doing that now. they all caught up to the game with that.
Yeah.
So there's like a much more fundamental technology which we sought to introduce to make it work. Fusion, basically the most important thing about it, and so we bought this company called SDF Labs, a great San Francisco startup. I met all the founders when I traveled over there once. Very smart, young, and ambitious people. They basically created this similar to dbt standard, but they did three things differently. One was they built it in Rust instead of Python. Now, it doesn't matter for us as practitioners, except that it's 30 times faster to do its job of like figuring out how the SQL is going to run.
Using Rust.
30 times faster than Python, right? The back-end stuff.
Yeah.
So that means when you have really big dbt projects, like Canva's thousands of models, maybe tens of thousands, they might be waiting minutes for dbt to figure out the lineage and to figure out whether there's errors, compilation, right?
Yeah.
Rust-based Fusion will take seconds or milliseconds. It's essentially
First
irrelevant.
time I've heard of Rust in a while.
That's right. Me too, right? Like
Yeah.
I never, because as a data practitioner, it didn't matter. We don't really use Rust day to day. We use SQL, maybe Python
Yeah.
for data science, but engineers use Rust now, right? Or Golang, some new age languages, right?
Yeah.
So Rust was critical, but the thing that we care about really is the SQL compiler that Fusion introduced into dbt. Now, I'm going to try to make this like accessible. What a SQL compiler is the step that basically understands what the code's going to do before it does it. So it reads the code, all that business logic, right? That SQL is ultimately. And it can say, will these group bys, will these joins, will these selects, will these column renames, all the things that you've written, will it work? Will Databricks understand what you're about to run? Is this a valid function? Is that a valid name? Everything, right? And if it doesn't, it'll throw an error. And so that SQL compiler that it built for Fusion is multi-dialect. So it understands every single major SQL platform. Every single one. So it means that you can take, and this is where the migration proof comes from, right? Take your dbt project on Snowflake and you just switch it to Databricks. You just point it to Databricks SQL compute. Immediate parse will happen and Fusion will say, here's the 7 things that wouldn't work in Databricks. And here's how to fix them. Instant. You don't even run it on the cloud compute. It's local. As our CPO, Ryan Seeger, said, it's like JVM for software engineers, right? It's like a local virtualization of your data platform for free on your laptop. It's big.
I must ask one question. I don't know if I'm going to throw you under the bus here with this, but also all of this is like, you've got your old school developers who are, like you talk about new age technologies and you talk about new ways of doing things. Like dbt is probably one of the main players in the rise for the new slogan or new job title, analytics engineer.
Yeah.
Since dbt has come out, I think I've just seen analytics engineer and rise. So it's obviously got parts to play in it. Everything you've just said about the composers with Rust and Fusion, etc.
Sure.
What about not age bias or anything like this, but people who are more into the old school way of doing things, traditional databases, traditional ways of doing things?
Okay.
What are they going to say to you when you're talking about all of these visionary things versus, well, we're doing it this way, but it's still the right way?
Okay, that's fair. I think for really old school folks, right? Like, okay, so again, there's 2 kinds of folks in the market, right? There's people who are new to the market and became an analytics engineer from first principle. Like that's the first thing they touched on.
Yeah.
So they probably learned dbt or something along those lines at the outset. And then there's, like you said, there's a lot of people still in the job market who have been doing Teradata stored procedures for 30 years and can still offer that to the big banks and insurers who need that skill set. So 2 things we can do there is 1, help teach them dbt. 2 is help them migrate the code base immediately to dbt so they can hit the ground running and not feel like there's a lot of momentum. Because this is the thing that was really stuffing people up, right? It was like, all this vision's great, but I've got 10,000 stored procedures. I'm going to make big numbers here, but people are like this, right? 10,000 stored procedures in Teradata and all this like proprietary code that some guy wrote ages ago. And we just run it because we're not quite sure how to unpeel it all, right? And so we don't want to break something that's kind of working already. And they're just maintaining that stuff, right? So with that like momentum to get out of it and maybe their lack of interest maybe in changing things, like how do we help them move along? So again, to start on the kind of skill set shift, I'll give you a quick example. We were doing a POC with a particular insurer in Australia, and it was actually a little bit different in that it was a Databricks POC, and they were doing more like Python stuff, and they're trying to move their mindset into dbt. So I'm talking about it because it's still a mindset shift kind of case study. And they asked one of their new guys, he'd been there for a month, to be part of the POC to see how quickly he could learn both.
I like where you're going with this one.
And so during that POC, he spent about a week going back and forth with his team, trying to understand, hey man, like, where does this file go again? How does this like really random feature? Where are these functions defined? Like just trying to understand their current process. Because they had so much tribal knowledge in how they did things. It took him over a week to figure it out and finally just run it for the POC. Meanwhile, we sat together for 30 minutes. We had the same business problem because we were trying to do A and B test, right? And it was like, how do we do this in dbt? Well, you just write a select statement. You write this, you write this, you write some YAML with tests. We can auto-generate that for you in the tool. Productionize it. It works. Done. Yeah. It was a 30-minute call. So in 30 minutes, we got this guy who's never seen dbt before to learn and apply dbt successfully and just use the SQL knowledge he's already had, as opposed to learning all this tribal knowledge with layers of tech debt and trying to just follow along to what people are doing for 10 years or whatever at that particular company. This is the key. Not 10 years, but yeah, you get the idea. Like, this is the key. Like, that skill shift is not a big deal. It's still SQL. It's just taking away the ugly parts of the SQL and focusing on the business logic and making it easier. So like that stored procs, back to your example, stored procs to dbt is a really easy shift. But to actually get the code to dbt, this was the tricky part. At the start of the year, I was always very frustrated about this. It was only 12 months ago.
Yeah.
Where we would go into big banks who had all these years of tech debt. And when they said, how easy can you make the transition? And we just like,
5 minutes.
We have like a blog that shows you how to do the stored procs to dbt transition. And I'm like, that's not good enough. There's no way that's good enough, right? And my colleagues were like, yeah, that's kind of all we got right now. Sorry. Yeah. Like, I'm like, fuck off. So I've been kind of thinking about it a lot. And with Fusion, we have the mechanism to make it instant now. And I've done a lot of demos on this now because I'm very passionate about it. So the difference here is because Fusion gives you those errors instantly, right? It can take any kind of code, and then with AI, of course, right? AI is really critical. So kind of acting as that's like a minor thing. AI is major for those too. Yeah. AI has a lot of context these days, right? Like your GPT, ChatGPT, and Claude, Sonnet, etc. They're very good at writing code. Yeah. And dbt is a well-documented standard. So you imagine if you gave Claude a prompt like, "Hey, make my stored procedures dbt," it's already, even with nothing else, pretty good at doing that. Right? Because it can read the SQL. It knows the dbt like ref statements and the configs. It's seen 10 million examples online. All these Git repos of public code, dbt code. It knows how to do that. But then the risk is now, is it going to generate hallucinated code? Yeah. This is where Fusion comes in, because Fusion will tell it in the local like loop, hey, it's cool, this code's great, but it just doesn't work, mate. And here's why it doesn't work. Because this function doesn't exist. This thing doesn't exist. This flow won't work. These columns you made up. Do you mean this? Do you mean that? Like actual error codes, right? And then it just addresses them. You watch like Cursor do this recursively, and you'll see this little analysis happening. It's called static analysis in milliseconds. And they're just like, Fusion is just talking to the AI on its own. Dude, it's
literally just converting
step by step from left to right. This is what's wrong. This is what you need. Yeah. And just doing it because it thinks very fast as well, right? That's class. And it's just on your laptop. So it's not wasting a single dollar of cloud compute to do this. I did it live on stage in Melbourne. Yeah. Because I was like so convinced. I'm like, I'm not going to embarrass myself. I believe this.
This is going to work.
Yeah. So I wrote that one prompt, right? And I just said, here's like all these Snowflake stored procs that some guy wrote. Let's just say, let's move this to dbt together. Yeah. And we just watch the AI talk to Fusion and make a working dbt code base in 5 minutes on stage. And you can just run it now and you can push it to production. I'm like, there's no transition left. Yeah. The code just moves in, and once it's in, Fusion made it totally language agnostic. If you store it on Iceberg, it's totally like location agnostic. So it can take, I mean, this is a simple example, 5 minutes to make your entire company. I'm exaggerating because it's just an example, but migration proof. That's the big thing. That's why this merger happened. It actually is like, who cares anymore? Like, you can't lock me in.
Yeah. And just sort of piggyback off one of Sean's questions, not controversial, but something that's going to come up in the sort of from our guests and people listening. But the open source community, obviously, Fivetran acquired Topico as well, if I remember correctly, and that's going to be a talking point, going forward. Don't you feel like this is kind of killing the open source community in a way? I mean, how do you tackle that? Yeah.
I definitely heard people tell me that.
Yeah.
The content is like, you're killing the open source.
Yeah.
You see that on Reddit all the time.
Yeah.
This is interesting. So like, if you actually look at dbt as a product, like the enterprise solution, I think we've made some, missteps in like how we've approached the stuff outside of dbt core. Because dbt core, the actual bones of dbt, it's open, right? But how we orchestrate dbt in our tool how we show the metadata for like, hey, here's your production scenario and here's all the tests. It's locked down. You can only access that between a proprietary API that we created and maybe put that in like a tool that you're using, like into Calibra or something, if someone's built the integration. Those are all closed already. That's our mistake. So what I found is that people from both sides, like people as in our founders, have gone with eyes wide open about this and want to reinvent this new version of Fivetran and dbt to be more open. Even though Fivetran's historically not been open, and dbt's had the reputation of being open, but hasn't succeeded on all fronts.
Yeah.
So specific examples would be like, how do we make our metadata conform to like open standard? It's called like open lineage. How do we make our orchestrator conform to open standard like Airflow 3, right? Things that you can actually take out of our tool, our SaaS tool, and still self-host, and it'll work end to end. We're actually trying to be more open, not less, right?
I think there's way too much for one podcast to go through with the merger, and I think we'll definitely need to lock another one in. Maybe 12 months down the line.
Yeah, once we've actually made material progress.
And we can talk
We've
back
got a
on,
new company name.
Yeah. Is there any talks of, I'd say everyone's probably throwing names around just for the fun of it, but is there anything that's like...
Our names?
You can't probably release that right now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've learned more than we bargained for here, and I hope everybody out there has learned a lot. And obviously, big news with the takeover. I'm glad I can finally talk about
merger. Equal partners.
Because I think I'd seen you at the Databricks event 2 weeks back, and I had mentioned something to you. I've heard some news, and you were like, "Nope, nothing yet." But no, look, I think it's been amazing to have you on, and I think we're going to have to get another one recorded in the next 12 months when we can look back at this and to the moon, as they say.
To the moon, yeah, hopefully.
Absolutely. No, it's been a pleasure having you on, Shabbir. And I'm genuinely leaving this room, my mind blown. All the things that you spoke about, yes, we did a bit of research on it, but like just hearing it from your perspective and the way you articulated it as well was fantastic. There is one thing we always finish off with, and it's one piece of advice that you have for our audience, people who want to get into either DBT or this world of pre-sales engineering, etc. What's your biggest takeaway, I guess?
Okay, good one. Let's answer both, right? So from like if you're a data practitioner, I would really encourage you to embrace DBT in the first place. I'm still meeting, for example, data scientists who've never heard of it. And that's okay, right? Like, it's okay, right? Like, we are big, but we're not everything, right?
Yeah.
I understand. But it's the most platform agnostic skills that you can have in your arsenal, and people hire for analytics engineers, right? So do the 101 course on our website. It's 2 hours. It's free. It'll give you like that kickstart to say, I get DBT and I can apply what I already know for years to a new thing that every business is dying to adopt in some way. So do the DBT 101. It's free. Secondly, on the career path, if you love data, you want to learn more about the industry and the bigger picture of how our data projects fit into solving real value-driving business use cases, and you love to talk about it, pre-sales is a great career, okay? Keep your eye out for these kinds of jobs. Just have the word pre-sales engineers, solutions architect, anything like that, especially in the data space. So, there will be IT companies that do this too, which may be less relevant, but your Databricks, your Snowflakes, like the big companies that are hiring a lot of grads now. It's a very good career. Like Databricks in particular, they're hiring a lot of grad level solution architects. There's an opportunity to get into the market and learn. Apply for those jobs because it's the biggest positive that's happened to my career ever. I would never look back. I didn't know it existed. I thought it was a made up job when I applied for it. I'm like, there's no way. It's like, is it telemarketing? Like, what is pre-sales?
Yeah.
I'm so happy I've done it. Everybody I've referred into Databricks has been happy that they came in. No one's I only left because I had this even better opportunity at DBT, but
maybe you'll have to refer me and Pauline at the...
Yeah. We got 2 more pre-sales engineers right here. So that's
this
my
is the interview.
Yeah,
we passed the test. Yeah. Alrighty, guys. That's a natural wrap.
Yeah. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, mate. Thank you.
Lovely.